The leader of the opposition called the leadership of the RCMP despicable and accused your officers of covering up for former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in the SNC-Lavalin affair. What's your response to Pierre Poilievre's comments?
Pressure is mounting. Democracy Watch, a nonprofit, nonpartisan entity that's existed since 1993 to keep governments accountable when it comes to the law. And then last March, they put a request into the courts in Ontario to have a special private prosecution into the SNC-Lavalin scandal, looking to investigate Justin Trudeau. If they were to succeed, one of the first of its kind in our country, where a prime minister is under direct investigation and could face significant fines and or jail time, which is getting crazy. And it all started as Poilievre jumped on the Northern Perspective show to share how he's been disgusted at the RCMP and how they tend to look the other way when the Liberals do anything, and then is kicked up everything again, and Democracy Watch is putting even more pressure on the powers that be. It is getting very interesting. It's getting very heated, and oh baby, our country is getting very spicy. But welcome to the Elevate Podcast. I'm your host, Josh. If you get any value from today's episode, take the time to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us to grow. It helps us to get to new audiences and helps people see that there is something different than what the mainstream media has to offer. Now, let's get into our first story, shall we? As stated, Democracy Watch put this forward back in March, asking and requesting for a special prosecutor to look into the SNC-Lavalin scandal because the RCMP did a terrible job. Again, and this is what their request said back in March. Dear Attorney General Downey, I'm writing on behalf of Democracy Watch concerning the application it has filed into the Ontario Court of Justice in Ottawa for approval from the court to proceed with a private prosecution of former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau for pressuring and directing others to pressure then Attorney General Jody Wilson-Raybould to stop the prosecution of SNC-Lavalin in 2018, now operating under the name Atkins Rayleigh. The application alleges that Mr. Trudeau breached the obstruction of justice provision, the criminal code, yada, 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 and also the breach of trust provision, justice case file. The evidence that Democracy Watch has gathered show the RCMP's investigation was weak, incomplete, delayed, and buried for years, ignored key evidence, and continues to hide key evidence. The RCMP only interviewed 4 of 15 key witnesses, and is hiding key testimony from Wilson-Raybould, her chief of staff, Jessica Prince, and her friend and confidant, Jane Philpott. The RCMP has also accepted the Trudeau cabinet hiding key internal communication records and trusted without question the biased, self-interested public statements of the PM and everyone else who pressured the AG. In addition, and importantly, the RCMP applied an improper legal standard for proving obstruction of justice and didn't even consider prosecuting anyone for the general violation of breach of trust. And they go on to show the records that they have, giving them more reason to go after Justin Trudeau. Again, this was submitted back in March. Well, this took some time to get to the Ontario Court of Justice, and by then, this just came through. So the Crown Counsel received this application and made sure to put it to bed. And the reasons that they gave for halting this investigation and not pursuing it any further were these reasons. It was that there's no reasonable prospect of conviction. The Crown concluded there was no possible prospect the Crown could prove that Mr. Trudeau acted with the requisite criminal intent for either alleged offense. And then number 2 is that it's not in the public interest. Yeah, you see here the evidence that they've provided saying, hey, but we never got this information. So what do you mean? Well, it's like we can't prove he had criminal intent, so it's not worth our time. Okay. We are literally letting a prime minister off the hook for some very shady behavior. And if you need to be reminded of what happened in the SNC-Lavalin scandal, SNC-Lavalin was caught bribing officials in Libya, Gaddafi's son specifically, to the tune of around $47 million, I believe it was, and they were getting caught. So there's 2 things that could have happened. So Trudeau at the time had the option to either put a full criminal investigation into this company or use the newly created Deferred Prosecution Act in order to just slap a fine on them and make sure that they didn't get any criminal charges so that they could keep all their employees. Justin Trudeau said he did it for legitimate reasons. However, there were some weird connections between Trudeau and this company over the years. So people were wondering, was it really about the employees? Because if they were criminally prosecuted, they would have gotten a 10-year ban from any federal contracts, and their leadership would have faced jail time. So Trudeau couldn't have that. So the Minister of Justice and the Attorney General at the time, Jody Wilson-Raybould, was pressured to follow in suit with what Trudeau wanted. And she says, nuh-uh. We have principles in this country. We need to uphold the rule of law in this country, and we need to investigate these guys. And Trudeau's like, but these 10,000 employees. And she's like, they shouldn't have been bribing Libyan officials in the Middle East. I don't care. They did the thing, so they need to be held responsible. And so Trudeau put immense pressure on Jody Wilson-Raybould to play ball, and she wouldn't. And so she, in turn, quit. That is the story that came out, and that's what happened. Yet there is a lot of information that happened behind the scenes that has not come to light, and Democracy Watch wants to bring it to the light. That's why they put this request in for a private prosecution. And they said, nuh-uh. So today, Democracy Watch put an appeal to that decision to the Ontario Attorney General. And with that, I'll say this. We are in a technology age. We are in an age where your information is being sold at a premium. You might sign up for a newsletter, sign up for a loyalty card. The next thing you know, you're getting spam calls and you're also getting spam emails, and people just won't leave you alone. And quite frankly, if you're like me, you're one of those types who's just resigned and hoping and praying nothing bad happens in the long run. Then a service called Incogni came across my desk. A service that scours the internet for your information and puts requests in to make sure that your information is removed from these third-party services who are selling your information at a premium without your discretion. As I've said, there's times I've signed up for newsletters, signed up for loyalty programs, and all of a sudden I'm getting phone calls from numbers I otherwise don't know anything about. Or I'm getting emails, again, from addresses I know nothing of and didn't ask for at any point in time. Or, even worse, you hear of a big data breach of a service you don't even use, and somehow you find out your information was leaked in it. And that's where Incogni comes in clutch. You simply log in, put your information in, and then they start looking across the internet of where your information has been used, sold, or being traded with third-party partners. I've only been using it for the past week, and they found 39 instances already of services who are using my information and selling it at a premium or trading it at a premium. In this case, they found 39. They've resolved 26 of them already, and they're still working on the other 13 to get them removed immediately. And you can see my whole activity log right here. And as a bonus, get an extra level of protection with Incogni's custom removals feature in the Unlimited plan and Family Unlimited plan. You can point to any search site or other website where your personal information is visible, and one of their privacy agents will take care of the rest for you. If you want to keep your internet ID safe online, then download Incogni today. Take your personal data back with Incogni. Use code ELEVATE at incogni.com/elevate, and that's incogni.com/elevate, and you can get 60% off their annual plan today. And that is, again, incogni.com/elevate. Use code ELEVATE at checkout to get 60% off their annual plan. Now let's get into our next story. And the reason why this is fascinating, this is why we're covering it today, is because of the timing of it all. If you saw earlier this week, Northern Perspective released an interview with Pierre Poilievre. He brought up Justin Trudeau and the fact that he should be facing criminal charges for what he did with SNC-Lavalin, and then expressed how he's frustrated at the RCMP, or I should say disgusted was his exact words, with the RCMP for allowing him to get away with it, for botching the investigation, for not taking it seriously. So naturally, this got a lot of people on the left really frustrated. What is Pierre Poilievre doing, bringing Trump-style politics to Canada? Again, the same old talking points over and over again, right? This is disgusting. He wants to arrest his political opponents. Well, I'll make this argument. Trudeau's not in politics anymore. He's not a political opponent any longer. He still needs to be held to account. We were too afraid to hold him to account because he was prime minister at the time. Well, now that he's not in politics, how about we hold him to account now? And I'm not going to lie, I'm sure there's a piece of this that's a little personal and frustrating, where you see a guy like Justin Trudeau, watch him do everything he did to our country, get away with it, and now you see him on a yacht with Katy Perry enjoying his life. I'm sure that turned some stomachs up with some people. I'm sure that kind of frustrated Poilievre, and I'm sure, I have a feeling that probably fueled what he had to say on Northern Perspective show. And liberals are very upset with this. He's trying to arrest his political opponents. So naturally, Mark Carney had a press conference today, and behind him was the head of the RCMP, Mr. Ducharme. And he was asked by the press about these comments, and this was his response.
This is a question on behalf of my colleagues in our Parliament Hill Bureau. Commissioner, in a recent interview, the leader of the opposition called the leadership of the RCMP despicable when it comes to enforcing laws against the Liberal government and accused your officers of covering up for former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in the SNC-Lavalin affair. What's your response to Pierre Poilievre's comments, and have you ever faced political pressure from the government to not pursue charges?
So I think we've talked about SNC-Lavalin quite a lot under the previous government, and I think it was clear that there's no interference. I don't take any orders from any political individual. And as far as his comment with regards to senior management, I would invite Mr. Poilievre to meet with us and to meet with the people who run this great organization, 32,000 strong. So
you heard him there. I invite him to come sit down with me and the 32,000 other officers if he has some issues with what we have to do here. And this is very much in line with the attitude that was given back to Democracy Watch of why the Ontario courts will not be pursuing a private prosecution of SNC-Lavalin. We already talked about it enough. We looked into it enough. It's not necessary. Well, Democracy Watch brought forward some very interesting evidence of, no, you didn't do everything. You kind of just brushed it under the rug because you wanted it to go away. You're saying you're not pressured by any governments. However, I don't know. Maybe you're not. Maybe the RCMP, at least the higher ups of the RCMP, are just not good at their jobs. Because this has been an ongoing thing at the RCMP for years at this point. They continue to brush over and botch high-profile investigations and just claim, oh, there's not enough evidence, not enough this, that. And it makes one wonder, who are you trying to protect? We look at the death of Robert Dziedzianski from 2007. A Polish immigrant died after being repeatedly tasered by RCMP officers at the Vancouver International Airport. A subsequent public inquiry found that the officers had made misleading statements to investigators and were not truthful about the events. It highlighted significant issues with taser use, police training, and accountability. We look at the Moncton shootings from 2014. RCMP officers were killed and 2 were wounded in a shooting spree. The RCMP was later found guilty under the Canada Labour Code for failing to provide its members with adequate equipment and training to respond to an active shooter situation. This case underscored a systemic failure to implement recommendations from previous similar tragedies. We have the death of Miles Gray in 2015. Gray died after a violent encounter with multiple RCMP officers in Burn, BC, sustaining severe injuries, including a fractured voice box and a dislocated jaw. The case became a focal point for criticism regarding excessive force and the slow pace of independent investigations into police-involved deaths. We have the Mass Casualty Commission of 2020, where they found that the RCMP had communication failures and were failed to get accurate and timely information out to people when they had an active shooter on the loose in the province. There was a lack of clear command and training, failure to act on warnings. The RCMP failed to adequately act on prior reports of the gunman's domestic violence and illegal weapons cache, a key underlying factor in the tragedy, and systemic resistance to change. The MCC noted a paramilitary culture and a lack of political will within the RCMP, stating the force had done very little to systemically evaluate its critical incident response in the years since other previous deadly events like the 2014 Moncton shootings. So forgive me if I don't have a whole lot of faith in the head of the RCMP's comments on this. You have a track record of hiding things. You have a track record of acting slow. You have a track record of simply trying to cover things up. And obviously the 2020 mass shooting is a little close to home for me as I live here. I got to have to experience that to a degree. I have friends who are from the community, or at least the surrounding community, who went through some pretty tough stuff with the 2020 shooting. And the RCMP continues to show that they simply don't care. And this is not going out to individual RCMP officers. This is directly at the higher ups of the RCMP and systemic failures they continue to commit over and over and over again. So you to tell me, well, there's nothing more to look at the SNC-Lavalin. Well, this shows differently to me. And I'm tired of these people trying to cover up for Justin Trudeau. So yes, the appeal, I hope it goes through. I hope some serious stuff it starts to happen because, well, there's some serious national security threats we have to consider now these days, don't we? You probably saw news of this already. We talked about this, where across multiple airports in our country, communication systems were hacked by pro-Hamas propaganda, blaring in the airports. It's time we start taking our law enforcement seriously. Kevin Vuong said, this is a threat to our national security. The hacking of Kelowna Airport to display Hamas messages and propaganda confirms once and for all that the pro-Hamas movement that's been blockading and occupying our streets is a national security threat. And he's correct. These people have been in our streets, terrorizing our citizens, giving us a hard time, telling how they want death to Canada and burning our flag in the streets. And now they are hacking our infrastructure at our airports to put up pro-Hamas literature. RCMP needs to be cleaned up. CSIS needs to be cleaned up. Oh, I forgot about the 1984 Air India bombing too. Another one that was botched by the RCMP and CSIS. I shared stories that have spanned over the past 40 some odd years. This organization is corrupt. It needs to be cleaned out. And to see how offended they were by Pierre Poilievre's comments about their lack of investigation into the SNC-Lavalin scandal tells me everything I need to know. I stand with Democracy Watch on this. We need a private prosecution on this, and we're going to be following the story. And if it goes through, oh baby, get ready. Because that means something for our country. It means we're going to see a political figure held to account for what they did while in office. And at the same time, we have to think about, well, the unity of our country at the same time. Because if that goes through, well, it's game on, because we've seen what happened south of the border. Democrats try to throw Trump in prison multiple times. And now he's calling for the same of the other side. So it's interesting. But anyways, enjoy your day. Have yourselves a good one. I'm out.